Hello and welcome to episode 9 of UKC's climbing competition show in isolation. Charlie Bosco here, joined, as I have been for every episode, by Mike Langley and Natalie Berry. And joining us this week is a very special guest, Team USA climber and Olympian. How does that sound? Kyra Condie. Kyra, how's things over in Salt Lake? What's isolation been like for you?
Let's see. It's not been too bad. I have a lot of hobbies that do well in isolation. So I've been doing a lot of puzzles, started knitting. I've got some cats now because it seemed like a great time to do that. And I built a home wall. So it's not been too bad, actually.
We're going to get straight in with the serious discussion here. We've already mentioned the cats, but we are actually going to get serious now. 10 years ago, you were diagnosed with, and I'm sorry, I have to read this, idiopathic scoliosis. Just tell us about that, because it's part of your story that some people know, but other people might not be aware of. What was that like as a young climber, young competitor? And what was your initial reaction to it?
Yeah, so I started climbing when I was like 10 or 11. And then when I was 12 years old, I was getting like tons of back pain. And I wasn't really somebody who would ever tell my mom when I was even sick or like would ever go to the nurse's office during school. So I didn't really tell anybody. But my coaches on my youth team were telling me like, oh, your form's really bad doing push-ups. Like you're favoring your right arm. And I'm like, no, I'm not. Like I'm doing it just like everyone else. Or like during planks or something, they were telling me my form was super bad, which was really frustrating as like a young athlete. Because I was trying my hardest and they were telling me that I was doing it wrong. And so then finally I was like, okay, my back really hurts. And I talked to my parents about it and I looked up a bunch of things on the internet and I was like, I think I have scoliosis. And I actually had a friend at the gym. He was like, I was like 12 and you climb with a bunch of adults. And so he was a chiropractor or a physical therapist, can't remember. And he did the scoliosis check on me. And he was like, oh, yeah, you should go see a doctor. You definitely have scoliosis. So I went to the doctor, and I was sure, I had looked it up beforehand, that it wasn't going to be bad enough for surgery because it's basically like if it's under 20 degrees, you don't really do anything. If it's between 20 and 40 degrees, you tend to get a brace. And then if it's above 45 degrees, that's when you get my cat is chasing a bell ball, sorry. And if it's above 45 degrees, that's when you tend to get surgery. And I was like, there's no way it's that bad. I would know if it's that bad.
Just quickly, we're talking about the angle of curvature.
Yeah, so like they measure the angle basically based on like they have a vertebrae and they draw a line on the bottom of each like vertebrae or top of one, and then the angle that this creates basically. And so I was like, there's no way that mine is going to be worse than 45 degrees. And then when I got this call from the doctor, she was like, oh, it's 53 degrees. And so I burst into tears because I knew that would mean I'd need surgery. And that's when like we started going to different surgeons to get different opinions and stuff.
I understand that some of those opinions initially weren't quite what you wanted to hear, obviously. And there's a bit of a story about what one of the first nurses actually told you, is there not, about exactly how they approached you and climbing and what your future may be? Yeah,
so the first surgeon I went to was at this really, really renowned hospital that happens to be in Minnesota, which is where I'm from. And so my parents really wanted us to go there because it's the best. And then, there, the nurse was the one who did all the tests. So they like watch you walk, they check the difference in the height of your shoulders, like things like that. And so the nurse did all those things, which I thought was weird because I kind of wanted the surgeon to do all those things. And then, when they told me that it was going to be 9 months until I could climb again, I burst into tears as a 12-year-old would do. I'd probably do the same thing now. When they were like trying to figure out why I was so upset, the nurse, as a way of comforting me, was basically like, well, climbing isn't that important. One day you'll have a family. Like you won't really care about sports. And even as a 12-year-old, that like did not sit well with me. So I told my parents I wanted to go to a different doctor. And so we found a second opinion, and he only told me 4 months to climbing again. And a third opinion also said 4 months. So that was like pretty standard, I guess. And the second guy told me to send him a picture when I was standing on top of the podium, and like was really supportive. And so I really liked him. And so I went with him.
When you think back on what the nurse said now about climbing not being important, do you kind of see it as a weird blessing in disguise because it kind of forced you to realize how important climbing actually was to you, and then as a result of that you went to a different surgeon?
I think the surgery in general did that for me. I was kind of at that phase of life where you're maybe losing some interest, or like you've been going like you have to not hang out with friends in the evening to go to climbing practice and things like that. And so I was kind of losing a little bit of interest. And so then to have it taken away from me, yeah, it was definitely really eye-opening and made me love it more. I had something else to say too about that, but I lost it. Oh well.
Just quickly explain the nature of what you've had done, because I've never heard you make it an excuse out of it, but it's still interesting to know exactly what you're dealing with. Yeah,
so basically what they do is they take all the vertebrae that they need to fuse together and they break them. So I know some versions of the surgery, they basically break off all the spinous processes so that the bones think that they're broken. And then they add in bone in between, or bone marrow in between, and take out all the discs and then create it into one bone basically. And so I have metal in my back as well, but the metal is essentially just an internal like brace, but it doesn't do anything now. So it's actually that it's just all one bone. So that those 10 vertebrae can't move like all the other vertebrae at all. It's basically like having like an ulna in my back. I guess the other thing that I was thinking is that the first surgeon I went to wanted to fuse more of my back than the second surgeon, which was actually really important with how much mobility I have. If they had gone down any further, like I would have way less mobility and probably not be able to climb like I do.
How much does it restrict your mobility as it is?
I feel like I only notice it on like these weirder and weirder climbs that we keep getting. Like if I'm just doing like straightforward hard climbing, I rarely notice it. But on like the types of things where like your hand is next to your foot and you're like pressing into something above your head, that gets really rough. There was like the second boulder in finals in Toulouse was like my worst nightmare.
I remember watching that and just thinking, she's not going to be able to do this.
Yeah, I remember looking at it when we were previewing and being like, I'm going to try, but I really don't think this is going to happen. So yeah, it's like things like that where it gets really frustrating, but they luckily happen so little that it's okay.
You say it affects your mobility. Does it in some weird ways also give you some stability? Like, sorry, excuse my ignorance, but it's just interesting to know.
Yeah, people have asked that. I don't know. I don't think that it really helps me like physically in any way. I think mentally probably is the way that it's helped me, like as far as like gaining motivation and stuff like that. And it definitely created my style. Like I'm really good at that like straightforward climbing because that's what I like the most because it doesn't hurt. So.
Sorry, it's just such a blasé way of talking about a serious thing. I like it because it doesn't hurt. Let's just go back to the start of your competition climbing career. You started out in speed, competing.
Well, I did all three at once, actually. Yeah. I always did everything, yeah.
But unusually, you did compete in speed, I guess.
Yeah.
With that history, just quickly, with that history, did that make you feel pretty positive when the Olympic decision was announced?
Well, in the US, like almost all youth climbers do all the disciplines, I would say. Like you go to lead nationals and then because speed's also there, you do speed. And so I think this format actually, did play to that strength of being a decently all-around climber. Because if you look at basically our entire team, I think maybe except for Colin, but Colin's even quite a good all-around climber. Like me,
Colin Duffy.
Yeah. Nathaniel Brook and I all are really all-around competitors. Like we don't have, like we all have one that we kind of special in. Like me and Nathaniel kind of more boulders, Brooke maybe more lead, but all of us are really good at all three. And so I guess it was hard to know whether or not that'd be enough with this format, but I definitely was excited. Just that I think it did play to my strengths. Obviously, I would love it to be separate, like out disciplines. But
talking about playing to your strengths, a bit of a confidence booster going into 2020 and 2019. You won the combined Pan Ams and the first ever US combined invitational. Did this give you a bit of a booster going into that 2020 sort of Tokyo qualifying event? Because there was quite a lot of talk in the Team US about Margot and Ashima as well. And there seemed to be like a really strong US female team all of a sudden. But you had that Pan Ams and the US Invitational under your belt already.
It was kind of nice being a little bit less known, I guess, in some ways. I think if you were a little bit more famous than me, you kind of had a lot of pressure, which would have been really hard to deal with. Like even at Toulouse, me and Ashima kept sitting next to each other, and people kept coming up to Ashima and saying, "Wow, I really hope you get the Olympic spot." And I'm like, "Hi, thanks." Which, it was just like, it was fine. It didn't cause any tension or anything. But I was like, man, it's kind of nice that pressure's off of me right now. Like I had a bunch of internal pressure, but way less of the external pressure than some of my like fellow female athletes for the US. But I think all of us had a really good shot. It came down to like kind of the season. Like some people had some like slightly unfortunate circumstances and things like that. So it really could have been any of us.
You were training a lot with Alex Johnson. She was your training partner in the run up to the events. What's it like to train with someone with so much competition experience?
I guess Alex has always been like an inspiration to me. Like when I started climbing when I was 10 or 11, she was climbing at the same gym as me and winning World Cups already. So like that was just something as far as like I had that to strive for. Like I knew that was a possibility. Like she started at the same gym as me and got to that level. So I knew that was possible basically. And I think that was really big as far as knowing what was possible in the sport when I was first starting. And so, yeah, my favorite part of this year was getting to know, or I guess last year was getting to know AJ a lot more since I'd known her since I was, 11 and I was much younger than her at the time. Like now I'm still the same amount younger, but we're both adults. So
what did you learn from her?
I guess I think a lot of what I learned from AJ is more mental stuff. Like I think we have a pretty similar climbing style. She thinks about the climbs, I think maybe a little more than I do even though. But she has a really cool mental approach to climbing that I admire a lot.
She is actually responsible for maybe my favorite live interview we'd done on the IFSC in Munich last year in the semis. Do you remember this, Mike? And Jan, Evgenia was the only climber that got a top, and then Janja did all four. Do you remember? I think 18 people couldn't get a top in the semi, and I said something we interviewed AJ live, and she said, I think I'm pretty good at climbing. That was her opening line, and she said, but what is this girl? Who is this girl? And I just thought,
what was that?
Yeah, what was that? I just thought that was brilliant. Sorry, getting back on topic about the Olympic qualification as well. I remember Brooke qualified in Hachioji, and I don't think many people, myself included, had her down as the person that would get through in Hachioji. Did that change the team dynamics at all for you guys? Were you more competitive? Did it fire you up? Was there a little more tension going into Toulouse?
There was definitely a lot more stress immediately after World Championships. It was I think our whole team thought that our best chances of qualifying were at Toulouse and at Pan Ams. And so we kind of, even the coaches, we all kind of wrote off World Champs. We went for it. Obviously we trained really hard for it, but we were really focusing on Toulouse. I remember Nathaniel even telling me before World Champs, I was like, oh, I really want to boulder because bouldering is my best shot at the World Champs of doing well. And he was like, yeah, but aren't you trying to qualify at Toulouse? So shouldn't you be training lead for the lead World Cups coming up? So the way we were thinking about the whole season was really different. So none of us really had it on our radar. So it was definitely a surprise. I think even Brick was surprised. I think she was in shock for multiple weeks from what I know from talking to her. So it was definitely a very different lead up into Toulouse because it was there was one spot left and then suddenly there was three of us going. And I was definitely a little jealous of the, Nathaniel and Sean had this sick dynamic where they were both trying to qualify and they both could qualify. And so when they were like in isolation for the boulders and stuff, they were like really being like, oh dude, you did that one sick, me too. Like really stoked for each other because they were really hoping they would both qualify. And that just wasn't possible for like me, Margot, and Ashima at Toulouse because only one of us would be able to qualify. And so like obviously we were going to be really, really stoked for whoever did it or if somebody did it. But it definitely took away that like kind of excitement that you could have for each other, I think, which not to say that we weren't excited for each other, but it was definitely more stressful.
Yes, we talk quite a bit about Toulouse, and we mentioned how on boulder 2 there was this awkward compression roof boulder that really didn't suit you, but ultimately it came down to waiting for the results after the lead final, and you were there with your parents and everything. Can you just remember back to that moment and just describe how it was for you?
Yeah, so we found out after qualifiers that we had qualified. The only 2 spots that weren't determined were the 2 Slovenian girls, like Mia and Lucia. And I knew that going in. Like I remember writing it all out for my parents before going to Toulouse so that they could understand while we were there. Like I was like, yeah, if 2 Japanese girls make the finals, if 2 Slovenian girls make the finals, and this happens, like invites will go all the way down to 10th place. And so like I had written it all out so that my parents were like super on board and knew exactly what was happening. And so then it actually ended up working out almost exactly how I had like written it out on this Post-it note at home, explaining it, which is kind of funny because invites did go all the way down, I think, to 10th place or 9th place. And I was doing so much math for like the last 10 competitors of the lead final, of the lead, I guess is the qualifier. Because the day before I had made some mistakes when watching the boys. I thought results were pretty final, and then they weren't. And so I knew what I had to do to to calculate where I was going to be in the results. And so I was sitting there with 2 phones like on the ground so that I could see the route well enough, and make sure that I could tell like the time and how far people got. And I was like calculating what my worst position would be and then how high that would make my score, and then whether or not that'd be good enough to make finals or get the spot. And I think there was 3 competitors left when I was like sure that I had made it. And I think my parents were doing the same thing behind me. And they just came up and saw me crying because I had burst into tears, which is exactly what I thought would happen. And they thought I didn't make it. They thought they were wrong because they saw me crying. And then they realized that they were happy tears. So
I remember reading some articles that were doubting how many Americans, like if any Americans would make Tokyo 2020, and now you've got a full quota. What do you think Team USA or USA Climbing has got so right in the last year or 2?
I mean, I honestly think our coaches, Josh and Meg, have done a huge, huge thing for that. I think one of their biggest things that going into the year, having talked to them now afterwards, was that they're like, we need to believe in them because if we don't, then like that what's the point of this, basically? And so that was like their mantra going into the whole season. Like, we need to believe that we're making Olympians, otherwise, like it's not going to happen because if we don't believe in it, then what's the point? And I think that really did a lot. Like, I think just having that confidence from our federation was huge. Even when like the rest of the world kind of wasn't expecting it. I remember reading some things on Reddit that was like, no Americans are going to make it. And I was like, Well, okay. I think our coaches did a huge job. Like, Josh is an amazing setter, really good at movement and stuff, which is what I'm worst at. So having him to work with is huge. Like, that's the biggest reason why I moved here to Salt Lake. I moved the month of Toulouse to Salt Lake so that I could practice speed and get on competition style boulders. And like, the combination of those 2 things was huge.
It seems like you've got a really cohesive team there in Salt Lake, actually. And a lot of, Natalie mentioned it earlier, that there's a really strong female part of the team now. How important is it to you that you're surrounded by extremely strong women in the climbing world?
Yeah, so in Minnesota, I always climbed alone, like not even with other like people, just alone all the time. And so even just having people to climb with has been huge. And then there was really nobody who was focused on competitions, let alone like women focused on competitions in Minnesota. And so to have that here has been really, really nice. It's really cool to be like surrounded by such supportive women who are also like really good friends of mine. Because like, it's hard to come by. And I think it's really important because we can push each other. We're like good at different things. And so like you can learn from each other and things like that. And I think it's really important.
I'm guessing now that you're qualified for the Olympics, your profile must have increased massively. You've been on NBC, you've been Rolling Stones magazine. What's it like with this new pressure? People like us phoning you up all the time, asking for interviews.
That's definitely like one of the bigger things is like just so many people being like, oh, be in our documentary, or like, it's like, I don't think everybody wants to know this about me. But it's been cool. Like, I think it's really cool how much attention climbing's getting. I think of the new sports, it's definitely the one that's blowing up the most. And I think that's probably because it's the most accessible. Like there's climbing gyms everywhere. You can't really go surfing anywhere. Skating maybe. Like I think skating and climbing are going to be the ones that really blow up after the Olympics. But yeah, it's been really crazy. I think like I have an agent now, and just the whole process of things. Like I'd be super lost if I didn't have people helping me out. So,
Charlie, have you got an agent yet?
I've got a small team rather than one individual. Yeah,
Minions.
Yeah. God, it just reminded me of surfing. Actually, I went surfing at the Pan Am in Los Angeles when I saw you in February. That is not an accessible sport. I swallowed enough seawater to keep me going for a week.
Yeah, I can't swim.
Oh, really? I can paddle. I was no match. Well. Yeah, I was no match for the Venice Beach breakers. That's for sure.
It seems like you've got a lot more followers now, but you're also really good at advocacy work and outreach, and you use your channel to kind of spread important messages. Is this something that is quite close to your heart, using your profile to kind of inform the community and talk about difficult and important things?
I think, as athletes, like obviously the sport is the thing that we're known for, but if you're given that voice, I think it's important to use it. It's hard, it's not always like what people want to see or like things like that. So it's a hard balance to strike, I think. But I think, if it's something that's important to you and important to the world, then it's worth sharing. Even if you're going to lose some followers or, whatever. It's like, what are 40 followers when you have like 75K or something, and if it's something that's important and that you can maybe make some difference with. So
do you feel that that's kind of an obligation for you? I guess we've got to tread carefully and be neutral here, but it seems like the States has the opportunity to politically be a better place after November. Can we put it like that? And you've got people like Megan Rapinoe being a lot less PC than me with that statement about what she thinks of the president and a lot of cultural issues in the States. Do you view it as a bit of an obligation almost, that you've got these people that follow you and you have the opportunity perhaps to change some minds?
Yeah, I think, having a platform that's mostly sports related, you get a big variety of people. If you're only, somebody talking about politics, you maybe only have the people who are interested in that side of politics who are following you. And so to have both sides, I think there are ways that you can post about things where you hopefully can change people's minds, because that's ideally what you want to do. And so it's a really hard balance, and I haven't quite figured out how to do it right yet, but I'm definitely trying to figure out the best way to do it. Because it is things that I'm passionate about and like would really like to see some change, so, but yeah, I'm trying to figure that out, the best way to do it.
I spoke to you, I think it was last year, about social media abuse. Is that something that you've experienced more of as your profiles increase?
I actually think I have a really good set of followers. Like as far as like gross messages or things like that, I don't get a ton. I had like 1 week where I got like 3 pictures where I was like, this is a weird week. Why did these all happen this week? But no, in general, I think a lot of my followers follow me for climbing and training content. And so I've mostly gotten like not too many. Every once in a while you get weird messages, but I think accounts that kind of more like kind of go back and forth about what they post, maybe it's a lot more selfies or things like that. Not that it's a problem at all, but like you get a different following base that's maybe not just climbers. And that's when you start getting more and more weird messages. Not that you should get more weird messages by any means, but I think it just happens. but yeah, I think it is a problem that a lot of people weren't aware of until we like showed on Chelsea DMs, you just like the different messages that people get.
Just moving away from the complex and intricate world of social media, just looking to the future a little bit. You said that you wanted to be a vet in the future, but you've got the potential goal of Paris 2024. Were you heading for that, or will it be time to head to vet school, do you think?
It kind of depends. Like, kind of my plan was to really, really try for Tokyo 2020, but then have Tokyo 2024 as a fallback, or not a fallback, but another goal if Tokyo 2020 didn't work out. And now having qualified, like, now it needs to happen. But I don't feel too rushed to go to vet school just because it'll always be there. Like, you're not always going to be in like peak physical like age, and so like this is kind of a once in a lifetime thing to be able to compete and climb competitively and professionally. And so I think I'm gonna do that for as long as I want to or feel like I can, and then I'll try to go to vet school.
You've already touched on it in that answer, but how have you been dealing with postponement? And there's talk of potential cancellation. I can't go there mentally yet, but we certainly know we've got postponement. How have you dealt with that?
Yeah, I really am trying to focus on the positives. It obviously would have been very irresponsible to hold the Olympics with the state of the globe at the moment. And so it was definitely the right decision. And I'm just really glad that it didn't get canceled. I was prepared for the worst. And so to have just postponement was okay. I also think that those of us who are already qualified are in a really lucky position. Like, if this had happened right before Toulouse, I would have been devastated because I had, prepared so well for this competition and like was ready to try to qualify. So I feel really bad for all the athletes who were about to compete at, the European Championships and all that. And then in other sports, I know that there's people who, were planning on having babies next year, or we're going to go to school. And like, so they've put off like these huge life decisions for 2020 specifically. And so then to have to wait another year is pretty hard, or financially hard, or just devastating mentally. And so I feel really lucky to be in the spot that I am, being already qualified. I was already planning on competing again next year. I wasn't going to retire after this Olympics, so I'm definitely in like maybe the best spot possible as far as the postponement.
Yeah, FSC have rearranged some events until the end of the year, but what are your plans in the meantime? Are you going to get out on rock or just keep training?
Yeah, I'm definitely trying to enjoy getting out on rock. There's so much stuff around Salt Lake, and kind of waiting to be able to do it responsibly. I've been out a couple times just really locally in the last like week, basically. But up until this point, I had been just entirely staying inside because just a risk of getting injured and things like that, and overwhelming already busy hospitals and stuff. But I think right now, like at least in Utah, things are pretty kind of under control. I don't know. The news is all over the place. And so, washing hands, using hand sanitizer, liquid chalk, things like that while you're out at the boulders and stuff are all really like okay, it seems like. I say tentatively. But yeah, it's been really nice to get on rock because I was planning on just not doing any until after the Olympics. And now that the Olympics are so far away that it's like, okay, well, take this time to chill, not get injured, and enjoy climbing, and then get back into training mode.
Well, I don't want to cause any unnecessary suffering, but no one really did try the injecting disinfectant thing. Yeah, I'm just saying.
Maybe people did. I don't know.
Well, it's a shame he didn't try it on himself. Sorry.
Like that.
Just abandoned all PC-ness there. Kyra, it's super, well, not super early. By climate standards, it's early where you are, so we appreciate you getting up. And yeah, always nice to chat, and hopefully we'll see you, like we say at the end of every episode, hopefully we'll see you somewhere soon.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Bye.
The